Okay, what's up, Superdads and other YouTube people, in case you're not a dad? So this is free training, actually live now on Facebook as well. So if you want to be part of these free trainings and ask questions and have a repartee with me, all you got to do is join the Facebook group, and the link is right there. Every Monday I'll be doing live trainings on topics that the group suggests or topics that I just want to talk about. And today's topic is exercising for muscle growth. What are the important principles, things you absolutely must do? And it basically, from what we know, this is the research, but I'm not going to get super science heavy because I don't think that serves anyone really, other than people who want to publish scientific articles. The three factors are muscular damage, metabolic stress, mechanical tension. Those are the three. And it's actually simpler than that, because there's really one of those that's the crucial factor. I'll explain what each of them are and why one of them is really crucial, but the other two are still important. Let's start with muscular damage. Now, muscular damage and the proxy for muscular damage is basically soreness. Yeah, right? Do you get sore the day after or 2 days after you've exercised? Okay, that's a sign of muscular damage. However, muscular damage itself is not what causes muscles to grow from what we can determine. There is some possible mechanism whereby it causes adaptation, but it's definitely not the main driver, not even close. So why do I bring it up? Well, it's important because it's a feedback mechanism. If your muscles get a little bit sore the day after a session, it's a good sign, right? It means that you probably introduce them to enough stimulus that they're going to have to adapt in response. And so treat it as a feedback mechanism. You want to dial it in so that you know how much you need to train to get just the tiniest bit sore. What if you stop getting sore? Well, that's also not a bad thing, as long as your strength continues to improve and increase, as long as your physique is changing. Like let's say you're gaining weight, but you're not gaining waist size, right? These are all indications that you're making progress. You don't necessarily need to get sore, but it is one feedback mechanism that you can use. It's also useful because it can tell you when you went too hard, right? Especially if you're coming back to training after a bit of a break from it. If you jump in and go super hard, you're probably going to be sore as heck the next day. You might not be able to train at your next scheduled training session. And that's a feedback. That's feedback that you went too hard, you did too much. You just want a little tiny bit, a touch of soreness. And it's also typically associated with novelty. So if you do a new exercise, you're much more likely to get sore. However, that's not to say that progressively overloading in the proper manner, and we'll talk about that a little later, but that isn't also a kind of novelty, because what you're doing is you're providing a novel weight. It's heavier than before. You're providing novel volume or tribundal tension. Something your technique is better, something like this. And so these are all kinds of progressive overload that you can do that would result in a novel stimulus because they're more difficult or something like that, right? Okay, so that's muscular damage. Not sure it drives muscular gains on its own, but it's a very useful feedback mechanism. Okay, second one is metabolic stress. And the proxy for metabolic stress is the pump. So if you do, a set of like push-ups or a set of bicep curls or something like that, right? And you do the set properly, your muscles should be sort of full of blood. It should have a sort of the skin should have a tight feeling. It should maybe feel good, especially if you're used to it. If you're not used to it, it might be a bit weird. But, you look better in the mirror. Your muscles look more full. Okay, that's the pump. And that's a proxy for metabolic stress. And metabolic stress is basically just your body trying to fuel your muscles so that they can keep performing what you're asking of them. And, as the fueling process goes on, there's waste products, metabolites, and stuff that build up, and it causes the muscle to expand with fluid and things like this. And so that's metabolic stress. And again, just like with muscular damage, we're not exactly sure whether this really drives muscle growth. So if you get like a super good pump that pump on its own might not be what drives adaptation. However, once again, it is a fantastic feedback mechanism. So if you're trying to train, your chest, right? Let's say you're trying to do dips or something like that, and to train your chest, and you are not sure about the angle, so you're doing these dips, and at the end of it, your triceps and your shoulders feel super pumped up, but your chest doesn't feel pumped up at all, okay? And doesn't get sore the next day either. Well, that's a good sign that your technique, your connection to your pecs, your chest muscles, isn't where it needs to be, that you need to work on that exercise a little bit more and make sure that it's really targeting the muscles that you want to hit, right? So that is metabolic stress. Now, the real driver that we're sure drives hypertrophy is mechanical tension. And mechanical tension is basically just how much work you make the muscles do. How hard do you make them work? And it's not necessarily how hard you make them work at any one point in time. It is cumulative. So that's a great thing. What it means is that if you put them, put a lot of work on them over not too long of a period of time, that work's going to add up and add up and add up, because your muscles can't recover as quickly as they can expend the energy that you're using, and so it's going to build up, becomes cumulative, and once it passes a certain phase shift point, okay, it goes from being within the bounds of what the muscles are capable of to you are now exceeding what they are comfortable doing, and adaptation is going to be triggered, and with all the resulting, the cascade of changes that will follow from that. And so you just need to get past that phase shift point, okay? So you can imagine it like a bucket that you're just putting water in, and once you get past a certain level, right, now the water starts pouring out, and that would be your body recognizing that adaptation is required because you've put enough mechanical tension on it. Okay, so you can do this by doing a bunch of reps. So that would be putting, a bunch of cupfuls of water in this metaphorical bucket. You could do it by doing very few reps that are super difficult, and that would be you taking a bucket and pouring the bucket into your metaphorical bucket, and then just a couple reps could be plenty to get you there, right? But the real key here is going to be that you have to get the muscles close to or even past the point of failure, right? Anybody who's worth their salt when talking about muscle growth, not necessarily strength, because strength is a skill. And so you can practice a skill nowhere near muscle growth, nowhere near failure. And in fact, you should practice a skill nowhere near muscular failure, because you're trying to ingrain a neural pathway, you're trying to ingrain a way of moving, you want to practice it with the greatest level of skill you possibly can. Which is one reason why, if you're a martial artist, you got to make sure you practice your new skills when you're fresh. You don't want to practice new skills when you're exhausted, because it's going to ingrain sloppy movement patterns. Okay? But if you're trying to grow muscles, anybody who tells you you don't need to train close to or all the way to failure is not telling you the truth, or they don't know what they're talking about. Okay? You gotta push the muscles, because you have to make them recognize that adaptation is required, right? Now, you can really use almost any weight for this, right? But the general recommendation is anywhere from 1 rep max to a 30 rep max weight. That's a good range to be in, just because it takes way too long to do 50 reps of something, when you could just be doing 20 of a heavier weight, or 10 of a heavier weight or something, right? Okay, so then how do we make sure that we're getting to that point? Well, progressive overload is another thing that's talked about a lot by people who are into hypertrophy, and progressive overload is absolutely important. It's important because your muscles are going to get stronger, and so the same stimulus that you gave them before that caused them to adapt is not going to be sufficient anymore to cause the next adaptation that you're looking for. So you have to give them a more stimulating stimulus, which would be overloading them, which would be, building up your weight or your reps or your time under tension or whatever it is, right? However, the thing is, if you're training yourself all the way to failure and you know that you're getting stronger, then you don't actually need to worry so much about progressive overload. Now, I can't believe I said that, but it's true. It's a really nice facet of training yourself to failure is you don't have to worry as much about progressive overload as long as you are with semi-regular, periodical, semi-regular frequency testing to see whether you're getting stronger or whether you know that you're stronger. Just be careful that you're not only counting reps and looking at the amount of weight that you're lifting, because both of those things can be very deceptive, as your technique is not something that's quite so easily counted. And so the tendency would be to start sacrificing technique or speeding up the reps or something like that so that you can achieve whatever number you have in your head as the target number that will show that you've gotten stronger, right? And because what we don't want is to get the number that's in your head. What we want is to get to actually get stronger. And if you haven't actually gotten stronger, then chasing the number in your head is only going to get in the way of you recognizing that something's not right. So what happens if you aren't getting stronger? Well, that's a sign that your training is off in some way, and you're going to have to take a look at what the inputs are. Sleep. Are you eating enough? Are you taking, supplementing in the right way? You get vitamin D. How's your stress levels in the rest of your life? Because all of that stuff, it's all interrelated, right? Is your technique getting worse? Are you taking enough rest between movements? You might consider adding in some sort of supplementary exercise if there's some point that you keep getting stuck at, right? Something like that. It could also be a time for changing things up or a resensitization period. Okay, but you do want to be getting stronger, and if you're getting stronger, then you are progressively overloading. Okay, especially if you're training to failure. Okay, now the other thing, and so all three of those things: metabolic stress, muscular damage, which are feedback mechanisms mostly, mechanical tension, they all fall under sort of what you should be trying to achieve within a workout, right? Or associated with a single workout. There's a whole different pillar here of hypertrophy, and that pillar is absolutely adherence or consistency. Doing a terrible program consistently, even doing a not great program with a half decent level of intensity, but you're doing it consistently, you should be seeing some results. Okay, consistency or adherence to the act of exercising your body, of pushing your body, will cause it to adapt. It's that simple. Okay, so those are the really big ones, right? You want to make sure that you push your body hard, you train intensely, and what that basically means is train at or close to failure, right? And just a note about this word intensity. There are people who say like workout intensity is what percentage of your 1 rep max are you doing, right? That's the real definition. And other people say it's how close you're training to failure. And it's nonsense debate, because it's the same thing, right? If you I don't see how this is not clear. If you're using 90% of your 1 rep max, then you're already training close to failure, right? Whereas if you're using 60% of your 1 rep max, you can still train intensely as long as you're going close to failure, right? How fatigued do the reps make the muscle? Okay, that's the key. Now I want to leave you with a quick quote here. This is a quote that I think is going to summarize a lot of the journey of learning about this stuff. Okay, and Bruce Lee, one of my favorite people in history, he says, "Before I studied the art, a punch to me was just like a punch. A kick was just a kick. After I learned the art, a punch was no longer a punch. A kick was no longer a kick. Now that I understand the art, a punch is just a punch. A kick is just a kick. The height of cultivation is really nothing special. It's merely simplicity, the ability to express the utmost with the minimum." Okay, so why does this apply here? Well, when you start training, probably what's going to happen is you're just going to think, oh, well, what do? I just pick up these weights and lift them, right? It's like, A bicep curl is just a bicep curl. You pick up the weight and you lift it with your arm, right? That's what it is. Punch is just a punch. As you get into it, you become an intermediate. You think you know what you're doing. You probably start thinking about 1,000 things like arm angle and decline and incline, and I need to use this part of the bicep, and I hit both heads, and all and wrist angle, and all of these 1,000 different things. And you look at all the the studies about bicep growth among undergraduate students who are untrained but who have you can go down a crazy rabbit hole, and a bicep curl ceases to be a bicep curl. Exercising yourself effectively becomes the most complicated endeavor you can imagine. And then you keep going, and once you have spent enough time doing it, and you've done enough things to your body and seen what works and what doesn't work for you, it just goes back to being exercise. Bicep curl is just a bicep curl again, and exercise is just exercise. Basically, this is what it comes down to after 15, 20 years of exercise experience using all sorts of different things. It comes down to this: be consistent, hit it hard, recover well. Right? That's about it. So, I hope that that's helpful. If you have any questions, just drop them down below. And remember that this is meant to be a live training. I'm recording it because I'm still getting started with this, but I'd love to have some interactions with people. And if you have any questions you want to ask live, let's get to chatting.